The gun was 3 inches from Janet Phillips' chest when she made the choice that would change everything. It was 9:51 p.m., on a rainy November night in Manhattan's Koreatown, and 3 masked men had just stormed into Betty's breakfast nook, her dying mother's cafe. They wanted the $240 in the register. But when the youngest robber turned his weapon on the frail old man sitting in the back booth, Janet didn't think. She simply stepped between the gun and the stranger. The old man she shielded was Kang Chong-hu, the retired head of one of the most powerful Korean crime organizations on the East Coast, a man they called the Iron Fist of Busan. Janet had no idea. By morning, 5 armed guards would arrive at her cafe's door, sent by Chong-hu's son. A dangerous man who would look at Janet and see something he'd stopped believing was real. Because in Korean culture, when you save someone's life, you create Yoonhae, a debt of grace so profound it binds families across generations. But 12 hours before that robbery, Janet Phillips was a 29-year-old waitress who counted every dollar and prayed her dying mother would see one more sunrise. Betty's breakfast nook sat on East 23rd Street in Manhattan, wedged between a karaoke bar that never seemed to close, and a wig shop with mannequin heads staring blankly through dusty windows. The cafe was small, 800 square feet of worn linoleum and cracked vinyl booths. The kind of place where elderly grandmothers counted out exact change in coins, and construction workers ordered full breakfasts without checking the price. Betty Phillips had opened it 32 years ago with money she'd saved from 2 decades of waitressing at other people's restaurants. She wanted a place where the coffee was always fresh, the portions always generous, and people were treated with dignity no matter what they ordered. But Betty was upstairs now, too weak to come down most days. Her breathing heavy, labored. The cancer in her lungs had spread to her liver, and the doctors had stopped using words like remission. Now they talked about quality of remaining time. Janet had been adopted at 16, pulled from the foster system after bouncing through 7 different homes in 4 years. Betty gave her stability, a last name, and a place that felt permanent. Now, at 29, Janet worked double shifts trying to keep both her mother and the cafe alive. She knew the wholesale price of every ingredient, knew exactly how many customers they needed each day just to break even. But they weren't breaking even. The neighborhood was changing, luxury condos rising on every corner. The old families were being priced out, replaced by people who took Instagram photos of their food and complained when the Wi-Fi was slow. Tonight, the rain came down hard, steady, relentless. Janet wiped the counter for the 3rd time, not because it was dirty, but because her hands needed something to do while her mind ran through numbers that never added up. $240 in the register, not enough to cover tomorrow's food delivery, for $380 due on arrival. $12,000 out of pocket after insurance, not enough for her mother's next chemotherapy session. Rent already 6 days late. She glanced at the clock above the register. 9:47. 13 minutes until she could flip the sign to closed, lock up, and go upstairs to check on Betty. Make sure she'd taken her evening medications. Make sure she was still breathing. In the back booth, the old Korean man sat with his tea and newspaper, as he had every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 8 months. Mr. Kang. He was always polite, always ordered the same thing, green tea, no sugar, and occasionally a slice of toast if he stayed past 9. He left exactly 15% tip, calculated to the penny, and never caused any trouble. Lately, he'd started asking small questions. Your mother, is she feeling better today? The cafe, is it busy enough? Gentle inquiries delivered in careful English, like someone practicing how to care about ordinary things. Janet appreciated the kindness, even if she never knew quite how to answer. Her mother wasn't getting better. The cafe wasn't busy enough. But you didn't say those things out loud. You smiled. You said, we're managing. And you kept moving. At 9:51, the door burst open. 3 men in black ski masks. The youngest maybe 19, rail-thin, holding a sawed-off shotgun that looked too heavy for his shaking hands. The other 2 carried pistols, their movements jerky, pupils blown wide. High on something, angry about something. Dangerous. The one with the shotgun vaulted over the counter before Janet could move. He shoved the barrel toward her face, his voice cracking on every word. Open the register. Now, all of it. Janet's hands moved on instinct. She pulled the cash drawer open, stepping back, keeping her eyes on the floor. 13 years of customer service had taught her that aggressive men wanted compliance, not eye contact. The shotgun holder grabbed the bills with one hand. The other two stood by the door, watching the street, their heads swiveling back and forth. 240? The shotgun holder turned on his partners, furious. They said this place had money. Where's the rest of it? Check the back, one of them hissed. There's gotta be a safe or something. But the youngest of them, the one with a pistol and wild eyes, had noticed something else. The old man in the back booth. Mr. Kang sat perfectly still, his newspaper folded on the table, his tea growing cold. He hadn't moved when the door burst open, hadn't flinched when the guns came out. He just sat there. The disrespect seemed to enrage the young robber. He crossed the cafe in 4 quick steps and shoved the pistol directly into Mr. Kang's face. Your wallet, he screamed in Korean, then again in English. Your watch. Everything, now. The old man stood up slowly. His eyes were clear, steady. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. You should leave now. This is a mistake. The young robber's face twisted. He cocked the pistol, his finger curling around the trigger. Janet saw it happening from behind the counter. Saw the gun, 3 inches from the old man's forehead. Saw the robber's hand shaking, his judgment clouded by whatever drug was flooding his system. Saw that in the next 3 seconds, someone was going to die over a wallet that probably contained $40 and an old Metro card. She didn't think. Her body just moved. Janet rushed out from behind the counter and stood directly toward the gunman, her hands raised, her voice calm. He's just an old man. He doesn't have anything worth taking. She positioned herself between the pistol and Mr. Kang, spreading her arms slightly, making her body a barrier. The register is open. You have the money. Please, just go. The young robber stared at her like she'd lost her mind. The gun was 3 inches from her chest now. She could see the scratches on the barrel, could smell the gunpowder residue. Behind her, Mr. Kang hadn't moved. For 5 long seconds, the cafe existed in perfect, terrible stillness. Then, sirens. Distant but approaching fast, the distinctive wail of NYPD cruisers maybe 4 blocks away. The sound broke the spell. Let's go! One of the others shouted from the door. The young robber's eyes darted between Janet and the old man, his finger still on the trigger. Then he cursed, spun around, and ran. All 3 of them disappeared into the rain, leaving the door swinging open behind them. Janet's legs went weak. She grabbed the edge of a booth to steady herself, her whole body shaking with adrenaline she could no longer contain. Behind her, she heard the old man. When she turned, he was placing 3 $100 bills on the table, crisp, folded once. Your kindness, he said quietly, will not be forgotten. Then he walked out into the rain, moving with surprising speed for someone his age, and disappeared around the corner before the police cars arrived. Janet stood alone in the empty cafe, staring at $300 she hadn't earned. Janet just risked her life for a stranger, unknowingly binding herself to the iron fist of Busan. Before the consequences arrive, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? This story of Yoonhae, the Dead of Grace, is traveling fast, and I'd love to know how far it's reached. If Janet's courage moved you, show your support by hitting the like button. And to see what happens when the guards arrive, subscribe now to join the Velvet Mafia family. Now, back to the story. Her hands were still shaking when the officers came through the door. The police took her statement at midnight. 2 officers, patient but tired, asking the same questions in different ways. What did the robbers look like? How many guns? Did they say anything that might identify them? Did she recognize any voices? Janet answered as best she could. She didn't mention the $300. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because it felt private, personal. A transaction between her and a stranger that had nothing to do with police reports and insurance claims. The officers left around 1 in the morning, promising to increase patrols in the area. Janet locked the door behind them, turned off the lights, and climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment above the cafe. Betty was asleep, her breathing rough but steady, the oxygen machine humming softly in the corner. Janet stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her mother's chest rise and fall. She'd come so close tonight, so close to leaving Betty alone. Janet showered, checked the locks twice, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled her under around 3. The alarm went off at 5:30. She dressed in the dark, moving through the familiar routine. Downstairs by 5:45, coffee started, grill heating, prep work for the breakfast rush that would begin in an hour. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the streets slick and quiet. Janet moved through the cafe like a ghost, her body performing tasks her mind barely registered, cracking eggs, slicing bread, refilling napkin dispensers. The $300 sat in an envelope in her apron pocket. She'd counted it 3 times before bed, still half convinced it wasn't real. At 6:47, a black sedan pulled up outside. Janet looked up from the coffee maker, watched through the window as 5 men stepped out. Korean, all of them. Dressed in dark suits that were too formal for the neighborhood, too expensive for a Tuesday morning in Koreatown. They moved with identical precision, like dancers who'd rehearsed the same choreography 1,000 times. 2 took positions flanking the cafe's front door. 1 walked to the corner, stood watching the intersection. The other 2 disappeared around back, toward the alley. Janet's hand stilled on the coffee pot. A regular customer, Mrs. Park, who came every morning for scrambled eggs and toast, approached the door. She saw the men in suits, hesitated, then turned around and walked away. Another regular, a construction worker named Miguel, did the same. Within 5 minutes, 3 potential customers had left without entering. The cafe door opened. The oldest of the men stepped inside, maybe 50, with gray temples and a scar that bisected his left eyebrow. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime being obeyed. He bowed, a precise, formal gesture. "Miss Phillips, my name is Kim Jae-sung. Kang Se-jungnin has sent us to ensure your safety. We will be here during all business hours." Janet set down the coffee pot carefully, her mind struggling to process the words. "I'm sorry. Who sent you?" "Kang Dae-hyun, the son of the man you protected last night." "Mr. Kang?" Janet's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I don't understand. I don't need protection. I'm fine. The police already came and—" "You saved Kang Chong-hoo's life." Kim's expression didn't change, but something in his tone shifted, became almost gentle. "Our family's debt to you is infinite." The name meant nothing to her. She could see Kim register this, watch his expression shift to something between relief and concern. "You truly don't know who he is. He's a customer. He drinks tea and reads the paper. He is the Iron Fist of Busan," Kim said quietly. "For 40 years, he controlled the largest Korean organized crime network on the East Coast. He retired 5 years ago, but his son now leads the organization. And because you placed yourself between a gun and our former patriarch, you are now under Kang family protection." The words landed like physical blows. Crime network, protection, patriarch. Janet gripped the counter edge, her legs suddenly unsteady. "I don't want protection," she managed. "I don't want anything to do with whatever this is." "Nevertheless," Kim said gently, "we remain. This is not negotiable. You cannot refuse our presence." He paused, and for the first time, something almost like sympathy crossed his face. "To abandon you now would bring profound dishonor to Kang Dae-hyun and profound shame to his father. In our culture, such debts transcend preference." He bowed again, deeper this time, and returned to his position outside. Janet stood frozen behind the counter, watching through the window as her struggling cafe transformed into a fortress. She heard a sound on the stairs and turned to see Betty descending slowly, one hand on the railing, the other pressed to her chest. Her mother's face had gone pale, paler than usual. She looked at the men outside, then at Janet, and her expression crumpled into something close to fear. "Oh, baby," Betty whispered. "Do you know what you've done?" Janet crossed to her, helped her to the nearest booth, sat down across from her. "I helped an old man." "You helped the wrong old man." Betty's hands were shaking. "His world eats people like us, Janet. People who don't have power. People who can't protect themselves." She reached across the table, gripped Janet's hands tightly. "We could leave. Right now. We could get on a bus and just go somewhere they can't find us. With what money? Janet's voice broke. You need treatment in 2 weeks. We're already behind on rent. We have exactly $240, and whatever those 300 from last night actually mean. The mathematics of impossibility sat between them like a third person at the table. Betty's eyes filled with tears. I didn't pull you out of the foster system just to watch you get swallowed by something worse. You pulled me out of the foster system and gave me a life, Janet said softly. You taught me that when someone needs help, you help them. That's all I did, Mom. I helped. Outside, the guard stood motionless, silent, watching. Inside, 2 women held hands across a table in an empty cafe, and neither one knew how to save the other. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped across the table, neither speaking. Eventually, Betty's breathing grew labored. The effort of coming downstairs, of processing what the guards outside meant, had cost her more energy than she had to spare. Janet helped her back upstairs, settled her in the recliner by the window with the oxygen tube in place and her medications within reach. Rest, Janet said softly. I'll bring you tea in an hour. Betty caught her wrist. Be careful, baby. Please. I will. Downstairs, the cafe remained empty. The guards outside might as well have been a brick wall. No one was coming in. Not while those men stood watch like sentries. Janet went through the motions anyway, wiped down tables, refreshed the coffee, checked the grill temperature even though she had no orders to fill. At 10:30, a different sedan pulled up. This one was newer, sleeker. Black paint so pristine it looked like it had just rolled off a showroom floor. The guards outside straightened immediately. A choreography of respect that told Janet whoever was in that car outranked them significantly. The rear door opened. A man stepped out, and even from inside the cafe, Janet could feel the shift in atmosphere. He was younger than she expected. Late 30s, maybe. Tall, with sharp features and dark hair styled with the kind of precision that spoke of expensive salons and regular maintenance. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it moved with him like a second skin. He moved toward the cafe door, with a kind of confidence that suggested he'd never questioned whether a space belonged to him. Kim opened the door before the man had to reach for it. When he entered, the air pressure seemed to change. Janet stood behind the counter, her hands still, watching him approach. He stopped a few feet away, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. Miss Phillips. His English was perfect, barely accented. I'm Kang Daehyun. I apologize for not coming sooner. He gestured toward the nearest booth. Not asking, not quite commanding, just the presumption that she would sit. Janet considered refusing on principle. But something in his expression, not threat exactly, but a kind of patient inevitability made her slide into the booth. He sat across from her, and up close, she could see more details. Dark circles under his eyes that suggested he slept as poorly as she did. Hands that were manicured but showed faint calluses across the knuckles, as if he'd done violence recently enough that the skin hadn't fully healed. You saved my father's life, Daehyun said. In my culture, this creates yunhee, a debt of grace. It's not transactional. I can't write you a check and consider us even. The debt exists until I've ensured your safety, your well-being, your protection from any harm that might come because you showed kindness to my family. Janet kept her voice level. I don't want to be part of your world. I understand. He didn't sound offended, just matter of fact. But what you want is unfortunately irrelevant to what I must do. To abandon you would dishonor my father and undermine my authority. Every organization in this neighborhood is watching to see how I respond to someone helping my family. If I do nothing, it signals weakness. So I'm a symbol. Daehyun paused. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost vulnerable. You're a person who acted with extraordinary courage, he said quietly. And yes, that makes you symbolically important. But my father hasn't spoken this much in 2 years. He came to my apartment the night of the robbery and talked for an hour about how you didn't hesitate. How you looked at him like he was just an old man who needed help, not what he'd been. He leaned forward slightly. He said you have Zhong, the capacity to care for people not because you owe them, but because their humanity calls to yours. Protecting you isn't about control, Miss Phillips. It's about honoring the only good thing that's happened to my father in 5 years. The unexpected intimacy of the confession caught Janet off guard. Dae-hyun seemed to register her reaction. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the table between them. $10,000, he said. For lost revenue. Your customers won't return while my guards are present. This should cover the gap until the situation stabilizes. Janet stared at the envelope like it might bite her. I can't accept that. You can, and you should. His tone was gentle but firm. Your mother needs treatment. This cafe needs to stay open. Janet's hand moved toward the envelope, then stopped. Dae-hyun's hand covered hers before she could withdraw it. The touch was brief, unexpected, his palm warm against her knuckles. Both of them froze. For 3 seconds, neither moved. Janet felt the contact like an electric current, something that traveled from his skin to hers and settled somewhere behind her ribs. Dae-hyun withdrew his hand carefully, as if he'd felt something unexpected too, something he hadn't planned for. Keep it, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. For your mother's treatment, for rent, for whatever you need. I won't be owned by you or anyone, Janet said quietly. Something flashed in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Interest. Something that made the air between them feel charged. I wouldn't want to own you, Dae-hyun said. That would destroy what makes you worth protecting. He stood, smoothing his jacket. The guards will remain during business hours. If you need anything, tell Kim. He'll contact me directly. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. Janet. The way he said her name, just her first name, without the formal Miss Phillips, sent unexpected warmth through her chest. Thank you, for my father. Then he was gone, the sedan pulling away smoothly, leaving only the guards and the envelope, and the ghost of his touch still warming her hand. Janet sat alone in the empty booth, staring at $10,000 she hadn't earned, and tried to ignore the fact that her heart was beating faster than it should. If you're feeling what Janet's feeling right now, that pull towards someone dangerous, that fear mixed with something she can't name, kindly like this video and hit the subscribe button to support this story. Because 5 guards at the cafe is just the beginning, and Janet is about to discover the real cost of kindness. The cafe opened the next morning like always. Janet told herself it was because hiding wouldn't change anything. But the truth was simpler. If she didn't open, they didn't eat. The math was that brutal. She arrived at 5:30, an hour before dawn. Unlocked the door. Reached for the light switch. That's when she saw them. Playing cards. 1 on every table. 12 tables. 12 cards. Ace of spades. Each one placed face up in the exact center, aligned with eerie precision. Her hand froze on the light switch. Someone had been inside. While she slept upstairs with her dying mother, strangers had walked through her cafe, touching her tables, leaving their message. Outside, Kim saw her face through the window. His entire posture changed. Phone out, rapid Korean, then he was inside. He didn't touch the cards. Just photographed each one, his expression carved from stone. When did you last lock up? 10 p.m. I checked every lock twice. Janet's voice sounded distant to her own ears. They weren't here. 20 minutes later, Dae-hyun's sedan arrived. He moved through the cafe like a crime scene investigator, gloved hands, evidence bags, that focused intensity that made the air feel thinner. Janet watched him collect the cards, one by one. What does it mean? Dae-hyun set the final evidence bag on the counter. When he looked at her, something in his eyes made her pulse quicken. The robbery wasn't random. It was reconnaissance. His voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. A rival organization testing whether my father still has protection, whether the Kang name still means something. He held up one of the cards. Ace of spades, death or challenge. 12 cards, 12 days before they escalate. The words landed like ice water. Escalate how? They're testing whether my protection of you is real or performance. He paused. You proved. The Kang family still has people willing to die for us. That makes you strategically valuable. And in my world, valuable things get stolen. I'm bait. You're a person caught in something you didn't choose. For the first time, she heard frustration in his voice directed at himself. This is my fault. I made your protection visible, and visibility creates targets. His phone was already out. I'm doubling the guards. Overnight surveillance. The cafe becomes neutral ground official. Violence here brings retaliation from every organization, not just mine. Will that work? The half-second pause before he answered told her everything. Nothing is guaranteed, but I will do everything in my power to ensure you survive my father's gratitude. The next week was a countdown. Guards doubled to 10, rotating shifts, always watching. Regular customers stopped coming. Mrs. Park, who'd ordered scrambled eggs every morning for 3 years, crossed the street when she saw the guards. Miguel, the construction worker, stopped showing up entirely. The cafe was marked. Everyone in Manhattan, Koreatown knew what it meant. Revenue didn't just drop, it collapsed. Janet did the math every night. 6 more days until the 12 ran out. $400 in the register. Betty's next treatment in 10 days. The numbers never worked. On day 8, something unexpected happened. Chong-Hu returned. He entered at 2 p.m., when the cafe was empty except for Janet wiping tables that didn't need wiping, just to keep her hands busy. Miss Janet. His voice was gentle. I wonder if I might speak with your mother. Janet's first instinct was no. Betty was having a bad day. The stairs were impossible, the oxygen wasn't enough, the pain medication made her foggy. But something in Chong-Hu's expression stopped her. A gentleness. A recognition of shared mortality. She's upstairs. I'll take you. Betty was in the recliner by the window, oxygen tube in place. A crossword puzzle she was too tired to finish in her lap. Mom, you have a visitor. Chong-Hu bowed slightly at the doorway. Mrs. Phillips, I am Kang Chong-Hu. Your daughter saved my life. I wanted to meet the woman who raised someone with such courage. Betty studied him for a long moment, this frail old man who'd brought armed guards and rival organizations and a 12-day countdown into their lives. Then she gestured to the chair beside her. Sit, Mr. Kang. Let's talk about our children and the messes they've made of trying to protect us. Janet left them there. 2 dying people finding unexpected common ground. When Chong-Hu left an hour later, Betty looked more at peace than she'd been in weeks. The next day he returned. Brought expensive Korean tea in a wooden box with instructions written in careful English. It became routine. Chong-Hu visiting Betty upstairs while Dae-hyun visited the cafe below. 2 parents trying to protect their children from worlds they'd created. And Janet, caught in the middle, counting down 4 more days and wondering what would happen when time ran out. Dae-hyun started coming every day. He'd arrive mid-afternoon, when the cafe was empty, and sit in his father's booth by the window. The same worn vinyl seat. The same view of the street. He always ordered tea. Never drank it. Strategic visibility, he told Kim once, when his head of security questioned why he was spending 3 hours a day in a struggling breakfast cafe. But Janet was learning to read him now. The way his eyes tracked her movements as she wiped down tables. The way he'd look up from his phone whenever she laughed at something a customer said. The way he seemed more relaxed here than anywhere else, like the cafe was the only place he could stop performing. By Thursday, he'd been sitting for 3 hours straight. His phone buzzed constantly against the table. He'd glance at it, silence it, then go back to staring at nothing in particular. Janet noticed his hands first. The slight tremor when he reached for the teacup he never actually drank from. Then the way he kept pressing his fingers against his temples, his jaw tight. She'd seen this before. Low blood sugar. Migraine. The kind of exhaustion that comes from running on nothing but coffee and obligation. She made the decision without overthinking it. In the kitchen, she prepared Juke the way she'd learned from YouTube videos 2 years ago, trying to make something comforting for Betty during her first round of chemo. Chicken broth simmered until the rice broke down completely. Sesame oil. A touch of ginger. the kind of food that felt like care in a bowl. She set it in front of him without ceremony. You haven't eaten today. Daehyun stared at the porridge, then at her. I didn't order this. I know, but your hands are shaking. You need to eat. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he picked up the spoon slowly, like the simple act required careful consideration. One bite. His entire posture changed. The rigid control that he wore like armor, the straight spine, the measured breathing, the careful neutrality of his expression, all of it softened into something vulnerable. My grandmother used to make this. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. Every Sunday morning. She died when I was 12, and He stopped. Started again. No one's made this for me since. Is it close? Janet asked. To how she made it? It's perfect. The way he said it, like the word meant more than the recipe, more than the food, which made something shift in Janet's chest. They sat in silence while he ate. She refilled the napkin dispensers at the next table, but she was acutely aware of him. Every spoonful, every breath. When he finished, he set down the spoon with precision. Why did you do that? He asked. Make this for me? Janet turned to face him. You looked like you needed taking care of. That's what people do. They see someone struggling and they help. In my world, nothing is given without expectation of return. Then your world sounds exhausting. Daehyun laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled out of him, genuine and unguarded. It is. Every day. For 20 years. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully decode. You keep doing that, treating me like I'm just a person. Not a position, not a threat, not a transaction. Just someone who might need juke and care whether I's eaten. Aren't you? Janet asked softly. Just a person? I don't know anymore. I've spent so long performing authority, I'm not sure where the performance ends. The moment hung between them, intimate and fragile. Then, from upstairs, Betty's cough. Deep and wet, the sound that meant fluid in the lungs, that meant they were losing ground. Daehyun's expression shifted immediately to concern. How bad is it? Stage 4. Metastasized to the liver. Janet's voice was clinical. Detached, the only way she could talk about it without breaking. The oncologist says 3 months, maybe 4 if the next round of chemo works. We can't afford the treatment she needs. Silence stretched between them. Let me help, Daehyun said quietly. No. Janet, I need to be able to walk away from this. From you. She met his eyes. And if you're paying for my mother's life, I never can. He looked at her for a long moment, respect and frustration warring in his expression. The offer stands, he said finally. When you're ready. If you're ever ready. This is the moment everything shifts between them. When care stops being obligation and becomes something neither of them can control. If Janet's struggle is hitting close to home, kindly like this video, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell me, would you accept Daehyun's help, or would you walk away? Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't danger. It's trusting someone enough to need them. He left at 7, when the first evening customers started trickling in. Janet watched his sedan pull away and told herself the hollow feeling in her chest was just exhaustion. The next days passed in a strange rhythm. Daehyun came every afternoon. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just existed in the same space, her wiping tables, him pretending to read emails while actually watching her. The 12-day countdown ticked forward. 9 days. 8. 7. Nothing happened. The waiting was worse than action would have been. On day 6, Janet woke at 3 a.m. to silence. Wrong silence. Betty's oxygen machine had a rhythm, a soft mechanical wheeze every 4 seconds. Janet had learned to sleep through it months ago, the way mothers learn to sleep through their baby's breathing. But now, nothing. She was out of bed before conscious thought, crossing the hall, pushing open her mother's door. The bathroom light was on. Betty lay on the tile floor in her nightgown, one hand pressed to her chest, her lips tinged blue. Mom! Janet dropped to her knees, fingers finding her mother's wrist. Pulse there. Thready but there. Betty's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, struggling. Can't breathe. Janet's hands shook as she dialed 911, gave the address, stayed on the line while she grabbed Betty's medication list, her insurance card, her living will from the kitchen drawer. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Downstairs, through the cafe window, she saw Kim on his phone before the paramedics had even loaded the gurney. The ambulance drove to NYU Langone. They were rushed into the emergency room. Fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant, and too many people asking questions Janet barely heard. Fluid in the lungs. Oxygen saturation dangerously low. The cancer had spread faster than the last scans showed. A doctor with kind eyes and tired hands pulled Janet into a consultation room at 4 a.m. The next round of standard chemotherapy won't be enough. There's an experimental immunotherapy trial, very promising results, but it's not covered by insurance. The cost for 3 months of treatment is $180,000. The number landed like a physical blow. Without it? 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we manage the symptoms aggressively. Janet sat in the hospital corridor on a plastic chair that had probably been uncomfortable for 20 years and made the call she swore she'd never make. Dae-hyun answered on the first ring. What's wrong? Not hello. Not who is this. Just immediate alertness. My mother collapsed. The doctor says... Her voice cracked. 6 weeks without treatment we can't afford. Which hospital? NYU Langone. But you don't have to. I'm on my way. He arrived in 20 minutes, wearing gray sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt with a small coffee stain near the hem. His hair was uncombed, face showing the first shadow of stubble. She'd never seen him in anything but suits. Never seen him look anything but perfectly controlled. He looked human, worried, real. He didn't ask questions, didn't make her explain. Just sat down in the plastic chair beside her and said, What do you need? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat. I don't know how to do this. Accept help from you. Become someone who lets... She stopped, the words too big to finish. There's no normal here, Dae-hyun said quietly. There's just what we can live with. Can you live with me hating myself for this? Can you live with not trying everything to save her? The question cut through every defense she had left. Janet put her head in her hands, and Dae-hyun did something unexpected. He rested his hand on her back, between her shoulder blades, grounding, careful. A touch that said you're not alone without demanding anything in return. They sat like that for a long time, his hand steady and warm, her breathing gradually slowing from the edge of panic. My grandmother died when I was 12, Dae-hyun said eventually. Pancreatic cancer. We had money, but not the kind that gets you into experimental trials. She suffered for 8 months, and I watched pain erase who she was. His hand pressed more firmly against her back. If I could go back, trade every dollar I have now to give her those treatments, I'd do it without hesitation. You have a chance I didn't have. Please don't refuse it because you're afraid of what accepting means. Janet lifted her head, and their faces were close. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the faint scar along his jaw. The way he was looking at her like she was something precious he was terrified of breaking. I'm afraid of needing you, she whispered. I've spent my whole life making sure I don't need anyone, because needing people is how you get hurt when they leave. I'm not leaving. The certainty in his voice was almost frightening. I know you don't trust that yet. I know I haven't earned it. But Janet, let me do this. Let me help because I want to. Because you matter to me. Because you make me want to be better than what I am. The silence stretched between them, fragile and enormous. Okay, she whispered. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. Thank you for trusting me. I don't trust you, Janet said honestly. Not yet, but I'm choosing to. That's different. It's more than I deserve. Outside, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. Inside, 2 people sat holding hands in a hospital corridor, and something fundamental had shifted between them. Something that felt dangerously like hope. The payment was made that morning, and Betty started treatment. The immunotherapy would start in 3 days, pending final blood work and insurance paperwork that Dae-hyun's lawyer somehow expedited within hours. Janet spent the day between her mother's hospital room and the cafe, trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine, as if anything about her life was normal anymore. Day 12 arrived on a Tuesday. The breakfast rush was unusually busy. Maybe people had finally gotten used to the guards outside, or maybe they'd heard Betty was sick and came to show support in the quiet way neighborhood people do. Ordering extra coffee, leaving bigger tips, not asking questions. Janet was refilling Mrs. Park's cup she'd started coming back last week, when a black SUV pulled up at the cafe. Different from Dae-hyun's sedan, bigger, tinted windows that reflected the morning sun like mirrors. 4 men stepped out. Business casual pressed khakis and polo shirts, like they were heading to a golf course in Westchester. But their movements were too coordinated, too watchful. They entered and sat at the table nearest the door, where they could see both entrances and all 3 guards Kim had positioned inside during peak hours. Kim's phone was out before they'd settled into their seats. One of the men Chinese, maybe 40, with wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like an accountant, raised a hand. Just coffee. 4 cups. Black. Janet's hands didn't shake as she poured. 13 years of customer service had taught her how to perform calm even when her pulse was racing. She set the cups down. They thanked her politely. To anyone watching, it looked like 4 businessmen grabbing coffee before work. But the air in the cafe had changed. Customers were eating faster, avoiding eye contact, paying their bills and leaving. 12 minutes later, Dae-hyun's sedan pulled up so fast it jumped the curb slightly. He entered, and the temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. He didn't look at Janet, didn't acknowledge Kim, just walked directly to the table where the 4 men sat and took the empty chair across from the one in wire-rimmed glasses. "Wei Chen," Dae-hyun said. His voice was cordial, pleasant even, but something underneath it made the words feel dangerous. "You're outside your usual territory." Kang Dae-hyun. Wei smiled the kind of smile you'd see in a Zoom meeting right before someone suggests restructuring your department. "Just coffee. Your establishment has excellent reviews." "On Yelp," one of Wei's men added helpfully. 4.6 stars. Dae-hyun didn't smile back. Koreatown has a mutual understanding about neutral spaces. This cafe is one of them. I'm sure you're aware. "Of course." Wei took a sip of coffee. "Though I have to say, protecting civilian assets can be expensive, especially when those assets have become, shall we say, symbolically important. One has to wonder if the cost is really worth it." The threat was delivered in the same tone someone might use to discuss quarterly earnings. Dae-hyun stood slowly, walked around the table, stopped behind Janet, who was frozen near the counter, and placed his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was gentle, protective, unmistakable. He spoke first in Korean, something sharp and final, then switched to English, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent cafe. "Some debts transcend cost. Benefit analysis. My father's life is worth more than your organization's entire operation, and Miss Phillips is under Kang protection. Permanent. Non-negotiable." Wei studied him for a long moment, then nodded, almost appreciatively. "Understood. Thank you for the clarification." He stood. His men followed. They left exact change on the table, including a 15% tip, and walked out. The SUV pulled away smoothly, disappearing into morning traffic. The cafe remained silent. Janet felt every customer's eyes on her now. Not with the casual recognition of a regular waitress, but with the careful assessment people give to something dangerous. Something that might explode if handled wrong. She was marked now. Not just protected, she was a statement. A line drawn in the sand of a territorial dispute she barely understood. Her hands started shaking only after the door closed behind Wei's group. "I need a minute," she managed. In the back office, she leaned against the wall and tried to remember how to breathe normally. The door opened. Dae-hyun stepped inside and closed it behind him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is what my protection costs. I knew the price when I accepted your help." He moved closer, and she could see the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled fury still radiating off him. No, you didn't. You couldn't have known what it means to be claimed by someone like me, what it makes you in other people's eyes. They were standing very close now, close enough that Janet could see his pulse beating in his throat. I knew enough, she whispered. Something shifted in his expression. The control cracked, just slightly. His hand came up slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone who'd just delivered a threat like it was a weather report. Janet. She didn't pull away, didn't move, just looked at him, heart pounding, and leaned in slightly. Their lips were inches apart. She could feel his breath, warm against her skin. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Sir, Kim's voice was urgent. Your father collapsed. The ambulance is coming. Daehyun froze, his hand still against her face, his eyes closed briefly like he was in pain. I have to. Go, Janet said softly. Your father needs you. He pulled back, and the loss of his touch felt physical. This conversation isn't finished, he said. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Janet alone in the small office with her racing heart and the ghost of almost contact still warming her lips. She touched her face where his hand had been, and tried not to think about how much she'd wanted him to kiss her. In the ambulance, Chong-Hu lay on the gurney, oxygen mask over his face, his hand gripping Daehyun's with surprising strength. The girl, he whispered. Janet, protect her. Promise me. I promise, Abioji. No. Chong-Hu's eyes were fierce despite his weakness. Not for duty. Protect her because you want to. Because she matters. He saw something in Daehyun's face, something his son probably didn't realize was showing, and smiled weakly. You care for her. Good. Don't let her slip away like I let everything slip away. The ambulance pulled into the hospital bay, and Daehyun held his father's hand and wondered when exactly caring for Janet Phillips had stopped being about honor and started being about something he didn't have words for yet. Something that terrified him more than any rival organization ever could. Chong-Hu stabilized by evening. The doctor said it was a warning his heart couldn't take much more stress. Next time, they might not be able to pull him back. Daehyun stayed until his father fell asleep, then sat in the hospital corridor for another hour, staring at his phone without seeing it. 47 missed calls. 18 texts from Park Min-jun about urgent organizational matters. 3 voicemails from contacts in other families, all carefully worded inquiries about whether the Kang leadership was stable. He ignored all of them. At 10 p.m., he got in his car and drove to Betty's breakfast nook. Janet was wiping down the last table when the sedan pulled up. She'd been cleaning on autopilot for the past hour, her mind split between the hospital and the cafe, and the moment in the back office when Daehyun's lips had been inches from hers. Kim had called with updates throughout the day. Chong-Hu was stable. But the worry hadn't left. Wouldn't leave. Because she'd started caring about the old man who brought tea to her dying mother and spoke about redemption like it was still possible. The cafe door opened. Daehyun looked wrecked. Still in the same clothes from this morning, the charcoal suit now wrinkled, tie gone, top button undone. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Dark circles under his eyes made him look older, more human. How is he? Janet set down the rag. Stable. Heart attack was mild, but the doctors say the next one might not be. His voice was rough, exhausted. They're keeping him for observation. Silence settled between them. The weight of mortality, his father's, her mother's, the fragility of everything they were trying to hold together. You should go home, Janet said softly. Rest. I needed to see you first. He took a step closer. To finish what we started. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Daehyun, I can't stop thinking about you. The words came out raw, unguarded. About this afternoon. About how close I came to. He stopped, ran his hand through his hair. This is unprofessional, dangerous, everything I shouldn't want. Then why are you here? He moved closer, and she could see every detail now. The exhaustion, the vulnerability. The way he was looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his feet. Because I'm tired of performing, tired of calculating every move. When I'm with you, I just am, and I haven't felt that in 20 years. Janet's hands gripped the table edge behind her. I'm terrified of you, she whispered. Not because you're dangerous, because of how you make me feel. How do I make you feel? Like I could matter to someone. Like maybe needing someone doesn't always end with them leaving. She took a shaky breath. I've spent my whole life keeping people at a distance because everyone leaves eventually. But you... The word stuck in her throat. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. But I what? His voice was soft, careful. You make me want to stay, to stop running. Her voice broke. And that terrifies me. Dae-hyun cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle, reverent. I'm not leaving, Janet. I know you don't believe me yet, but I'll prove it, every day, for as long as it takes. He kissed her. Not urgent or desperate, but slow, deep, like a promise being sealed. Janet's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the wrinkled shirt fast, unsteady, as nervous as hers. She kissed him back, and it felt like stepping off a cliff and finding solid ground. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, their foreheads touched, eyes closed. This changes everything, she whispered. I know. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Is that okay? I don't know. She opened her eyes. But I don't want you to leave. Then I'll stay. Upstairs, they checked on Betty first. She was sleeping, oxygen steady, the portable monitor showing numbers that looked better than they had in weeks. The new treatment was working. Janet pulled the blanket higher over her mother's shoulders, the gesture automatic, tender. In the living room, they sat on the worn couch that Betty had bought at a thrift store 15 years ago. Janet curled into Dae-hyun's side, his arm around her shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, the tightness in her chest eased. They talked quietly. About his grandmother's Sunday morning juke. About Janet's third foster home, the one where she'd hidden food under her mattress because she'd learned not to trust that meals would keep coming. About the weight of watching parents die slowly and feeling helpless to stop it. He made me promise something today, Dae-hyun said, his voice low in the dim light. My father. He said to protect you not for duty, but because I want to, because you matter. Janet tilted her head to look at him. Do I? Matter to you? More than I know how to explain. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together like he'd done at the hospital. More than is probably wise. She settled back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. Somewhere outside, Kim and the other guards maintained their positions, giving them privacy. They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the couch, and for the first time in months, neither of them startled awake at every sound. Just peace. Just this. Just each other. Morning light filtered through the apartment windows, soft and golden. Janet woke slowly, awareness returning in layers. The familiar weight of the blanket, the smell of coffee from downstairs. Kim must have started a pot, and warmth, someone's arm around her shoulders. Dae-hyun. She tilted her head back. He was already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. Good morning, she whispered. Good morning. A soft smile curved his lips, the first completely unguarded smile she'd ever seen from him. For one perfect moment, the world was just this, just them. Then his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Once, twice, a constant vibration that wouldn't stop. Dae-hyun sighed. I should check that. He reached for it, and Janet watched his face change as he scrolled through the notifications, the softness hardening back into something controlled, dangerous. What's wrong? Park Min-jin, my second in command. He set the phone down carefully. Emergency meeting. He says my distraction is undermining organizational stability. The word distraction landed like a slap. You should go, Janet said quietly. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'll handle this. Then I'm coming back. Promise? Promise. The meeting was in a Tribeca high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, the kind of office where tech startups pitch to venture capitalists and corporate lawyers billed by the minute. Daehyun arrived to find Park and 3 senior members already seated at the conference table. Their expressions were carefully neutral, the kind of neutral that meant trouble. Park stood. "Thank you for coming. You said it was urgent." Daehyun remained standing, a subtle power move. "So speak. Your protection of the Waitress has made us look weak." Park's voice was measured, professional. "Rivals are testing boundaries everywhere because they think you're compromised. Wei Chen's people are pushing into our territory. The Russians are asking questions about leadership stability. I'm not compromised. I'm fulfilling a debt of honor. You're sleeping at her apartment." Park's tone didn't change, but the words cut like knives. "Everyone knows. This isn't honor, Daehyun. It's weakness." The temperature in the room dropped. Daehyun's voice went dangerously quiet. "Be very careful what you say next." Park didn't back down. "Choose. The organization or the girl. You can't have both." Silence. Daehyun looked at these men who'd served his family for decades. Men who'd bled for the Kang name, who'd built their lives around loyalty to his father's empire. He thought about Janet making juk because he looked tired. About her stepping in front of a gun without hesitation. About how, for the first time in 20 years, he'd fallen asleep without the weight of performance crushing his chest. Then I choose her. Shock rippled through the room like a physical wave. "I'll maintain leadership responsibilities." Daehyun continued, his voice steady. "But my personal life is not negotiable. Janet Phillips is under Kang protection. Permanent. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally." He met each man's eyes in turn. "And if that makes me look weak to rivals, they're welcome to test me. I promise they won't like the result." He walked out without waiting for a response. At the cafe, Betty came downstairs for the first time in a week. The experimental treatment was working. Her color was better, her breathing easier. She moved slowly, but she moved, and that alone felt like a miracle. Janet was restocking napkin holders when her mother slid into the booth across from her. "You're different," Betty said softly. "Since last night." "Mom, you care about him, really care about him." Janet couldn't deny it. Didn't want to anymore. "I'm scared," she admitted. "His world is violence. What if loving him means becoming part of that?" Betty reached across the table and took her daughter's hand the same way she'd done 1,000 times before, whenever Janet was frightened or hurt, or struggling to believe she deserved good things. "Baby, I'm dying." The words were gentle, factual, and the only thing I regret is not taking more risks, not loving bigger, not trusting that some people are worth the danger. She squeezed Janet's fingers. "Is he worth it?" Janet thought about Daehyun holding her while she slept, about his confession in the empty cafe, about him choosing her over an empire built across 40 years. "Yes," she whispered, "he's worth it." That afternoon, Chong-Hu arrived released from the hospital against doctor's orders, because he had things he needed to say and limited time to say them. He asked to speak with Janet privately. They sat in the same booth where he'd read his newspaper for 8 months, back when he was just a quiet old man, and she was just a waitress who refilled his tea. "My son has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you," Chong-Hu said. "I've spent 40 years watching him build walls. You're the first person who made him want to tear them down." His hands shook slightly as he set down his teacup. "I'm dying, Miss Janet. Soon. And my greatest fear was leaving my son alone in the darkness I created." His eyes were fierce, bright, with unshed tears. "But you're his light." "His way out. Please don't let him lose that." Janet's throat tightened. "I won't. I promise." Chong-Hu smiled, a real smile, full of relief and something close to peace. "Then I can die happy." The landlord called at 6 p.m. "Janet, I'm so sorry." His voice was genuinely apologetic. "New owner bought the building this morning. They're terminating your lease. You have 30 days. The words didn't register at first. Then they did, all at once, crushing. Wei Chen. Retaliation without violence. forcing her out not with guns but with money. She called Dae-hyun with shaking hands. He arrived in 12 minutes. They can't force you out through violence, he said, scanning the lease termination letter. So they're using money. What do we do? Janet's voice was small, defeated. Dae-hyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a folder from his briefcase papers his lawyer had prepared days ago, like he'd been expecting this. We buy the building. We? We. Partners. He spread the documents on the table. Your cafe, my capital. 50-50 ownership. Not as debt as investment. In us. In this. He took her hands, his grip warm and certain. But also I want to do this right. Court you properly. Real relationship. Dinners at those little Italian places in the West Village. Maybe even convince you to let me take you to a Broadway show, though I know you'll say it's too expensive. A laugh bubbled out of her despite everything. I want you to choose me because you want to, Dae-hyun said softly. Not because you need to. Janet looked at the papers. At him, at the future he was offering with both hands. This is crazy. We've known each other 5 weeks. I know, but I've never been more certain of anything. Your world is dangerous. People will always target me. I know. His voice was steady, sure. But I'll spend every day making sure you're safe, that you never regret choosing me. She thought about Betty's advice, about Chong-hoo's blessing, about the fact that Dae-hyun had walked away from an empire for her. Okay. Okay? Okay to all of it. She smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. The partnership, the relationship, the risk, all of it. He kissed her deep, relieved, grateful, and it felt like coming home. 6 months later, Betty's breakfast nook thrived. The renovation had kept the soul intact. Same worn booths, same menu, same generous portions. But now the equipment actually worked. And there was a new espresso machine that Janet had finally learned to operate after watching 3 YouTube tutorials. Betty sat at the counter doing the New York Times crossword in pen, her color healthy, her breathing steady. The treatment had pushed her into remission. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Chong-hoo visited every morning now. His friendship with Betty had deepened into something beautiful. 2 people who understood mortality, sharing tea and conversation, and the gift of remaining time. The guards were still present, but the neighborhood had accepted them. They knew everyone's orders now, helped elderly customers with heavy bags, became part of the fabric of the block. Sunday brunch rush was in full swing. Janet worked the counter while Dae-hyun attempted to operate the coffee maker his 3rd lesson, and he'd only burned himself twice. Pour, don't dump, she corrected gently, hip-checking him out of the way. He caught her around the waist, pressing a quick kiss to her temple. Bossy. You love it. I do. They caught each other's eyes and smiled the private smile of people who'd chosen each other against all logic and discovered logic was overrated anyway. Janet carried a bowl of juk to Chong-hoo's table. Made exactly the way his grandmother used to, because she'd had him describe it until she got it perfect. For you, Mr. Kang. Made with love. He took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for someone whose doctors had given him 6 months and who'd somehow stretched it to 18. You saved more than my life that night, Miss Janet. You saved my son's soul. The cafe was full. Warm. Alive. 2 couples, one young, one old, finding redemption through unexpected love, proving that kindness, when protected, could survive even in the darkest places. Dae-hyun came up behind Janet, his arm circling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. $300, he murmured. That's all it took. You saved a stranger and gave me everything. She leaned back into him, watching their cafe thrive. No, she whispered. We gave each other everything. And finally, after years of running from attachment, Janet Phillips had found the one thing she'd been terrified to want. Home. Janet saved a stranger and ended up saving herself. I hope this story reminded you today that your kindness is never wasted. If you enjoyed this journey, kindly like and subscribe to help our community grow. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss our next story. Before you go, leave a comment and let me know your favorite part of the story. I read every single one and truly value your thoughts. Thank you for being here with me.